All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us. This is Left Bank Books presents St. Louis journalist, writer, and author Sylvester Brown Jr. We'll discuss his new book, White Castles with Jesus and Uncle Ray at the Used Tire Shop, selected short stories. Sylvester will be in conversation with St. Louis author and journalist Amanda Doyle. Left Bank Books is St. Louis's oldest independent bookstore. We would like to thank all of our supporters, the supporters of Sylvester and Amanda, and everyone for their outpouring of love for our bookstore. Left Bank Books offers curbside pickup and delivery to anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. We also just reopened, so you can come back in and browse and find this fantastic book on our shelves. And Sylvester will be coming in to sign copies tomorrow, so you can order a signed copy tonight and have it ready for pickup tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening, or have it sent to you via the mail. We are also very happy to be able to bring our event series virtual. We believe that events are a way to expand your mind and bring in new thoughts to make the world a better place. It's also a great way for us to support local authors. We hope that you support this event, and we hope that you support Left Bank Books by purchasing a signed copy for you or for all of your friends at left-bank.com. Purchasing a signed copy of the book from Left Bank Books allows us to keep our bookstore and staff operating, and it also allows us to keep this event series going. So thank you for your support. I'm Shane Mullen. I'm the events coordinator for Left Bank Books. I help produce our hundreds of author events each year with a fantastic team here in St. Louis. We will be taking questions from you, the audience, at the end of the event, so you can type your questions as a comment at any point in time throughout the event. And be sure to follow Left Bank Books on Facebook and YouTube to be notified about all of our fantastic virtual events. We have a ton of events lined up for May, and I think even more lined up for June. So certainly there's something on our calendar that you will be very interested in. About tonight's book, White Castles with Jesus and Uncle Ray at the Used Tire Shop. Inspired by the fictional writings of Langston Hughes, writer-author Sylvester Brown Jr. presents selected real and imagined short stories from his more than 30-year career. Here, Sylvester sits with Jesus, converses with racism, listens to the wise oracles of a used tire shop, mourns the neighborhood dope man, and discovers the miracle of White Castles during the holidays. About tonight's speakers. Sylvester Brown Jr. is the author of the book When We Listen, Recognizing the Potential of Urban Youth, the former publisher of Take 5 magazine, former columnist for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and among the most respected writers and journalists in the St. Louis region. Brown has joined the St. Louis American as its inaugural Deaconess Fellow. The fellowship is funded by the Deaconess Foundation as part of its support for Black-led COVID-19 relief efforts. And tonight, Sylvester will be in conversation with Amanda Doyle. Amanda E. Doyle is a writer and zealous St. Louis transplant. She's the author of several other books, including 100 Things to Do in Missouri Before You Die, St. Louis Sound, an Illustrated Timeline, Standing Up for Civil Rights in St. Louis, and To the Top, a Gateway Arch story. She seeks out the city's singular charms with her husband and 2 children. And now, without further ado, I am so happy and proud, and apologize if you can hear my cat angrily scratching. He is being very loud. Without further ado, audience, if you would please help me in welcoming our guests for the evening. We have Sylvester Brown Jr. and Amanda Doyle. Hello.
Hello, Shane.
Hi. Hi there. Yeah. Hi. I'm just pretending that cat is the audience eagerly clawing to get in.
Yeah. That's like creative imagination. So.
Can you actually hear him? He's being ridiculously loud.
I heard them. I didn't hear. Yeah, I heard the meowing, but I did not hear the scratching. It's fan mail, man. It's fine.
I heard the scratching, but not the meowing.
Oh.
We're like those philosophers trying to describe an elephant. I have one piece, you have one piece, and Shane has the actual cat. So there you go.
Well, thank you, Left Bank, and thank you, Shane. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Absolutely. We have a great audience here this evening. Audience, hello. Say hi in the comments. Let us know how excited you are to be here, or whatever you want us to know, where you're coming from, anything like that. But I'm really excited for this conversation, and I will pass off that to you, and I will enjoy the conversation in the background.
All right. Thank you.
Well, as you said, Sylvester, thanks to Left Bank for inviting us, and thanks to you for letting me share this conversation time with you.
You're
I
my
was cracking up about
the interviewer.
That's incredible, because my first choice is to do anything that involves leaving the house, and especially if it involves you. And yeah, I left the house. I'm not at my own house. This is my stunt backdrop for fancy calls. Well, I wanted to ask you first, just kind of as a way to lead into what you're doing currently, but how have you and your family come through COVID in the last year? What's your year been like? And maybe you can use that to talk about kind of what you're doing now for part of your work.
We've been blessed. No one in my family, not my kids, not my ex-wives, none of my relatives have gotten COVID. When I first got the assignment at the American, my girlfriend tested positive for COVID. So I was a little nervous. I wanted to do the series, but I didn't want to be part of the series. But thankfully, she was asymptomatic. She got over it, and I never got it. So I'm blessed.
Mm-hmm. So you have this inaugural fellowship now at the American, and your mandate is to put a face, really, right, on COVID and its effect in the African American community in St. Louis. That seems like a big assignment. How do you approach that on a daily basis?
Life is really getting kind of spooky, because the Deaconess Foundation specifically asked for narrative stories. They didn't want just the news on COVID. They wanted faces and places and stories. And I'm just entering the world of writing novels. I finished my first novel and got some more lined up. So it's great exercise for me. It's a challenge for me to look at COVID, look at the situation, and then find the story within the calamity, And there's so many stories I'm finding. It's either resiliency, it is devastation, of course, creativity, just so many different stories. Just to be brief, I did a story in this week's paper about a bar owner and concert promoter who 5 months before COVID struck, he lost his leg to cancer. And then COVID struck, closed down his business, and he couldn't even do the concerts anymore. But yet, he's still upbeat, still trying, and he's the restaurant is reopened. It's called Prime 55. So stories like that, that really sharpen my tools. I meet people, I tell their stories, and I hope that I'm getting better and better at it.
What have you seen? I mean, you've been writing in St. Louis a long time.
Yeah.
What have you seen in the past year that you hadn't seen before? That has been revealed to you either because of COVID or because of your new way of looking at these stories?
What I've really seen is really it's like Groundhog Day, the Redux. I mean, we keep going through the issues with racism and police brutality and the sheer and utter ignorance which has been magnified under a certain long gone president. But just to see the magnitude of all these forces coming together is kind of stunning, Life and death is so, we were just talking about how mass shootings now are just, a blip on the news screen. But the level of ignorant power stuns me, the anti-vaxxers not wearing the mask, the people who swore that Trump won an election despite all the evidence that he didn't, the people who stormed the Capitol. It's like a bizarro world. But I want to say that in this period, I've taken heart in journalism, in media, and all the different kinds of creative outlets the media has taken, not only to beat back the madness of Trump and conservatism, but to tackle COVID from so many different angles and so many different perspectives. So I think that those challenges challenge the media industry, the fourth estate, to step up and do what they were meant to do way back in the days of Benjamin Franklin. So I take my heart in that.
It's been, I mean, I'm a J school graduate. I love to stand up for journalists too. And it's been to watch people realize how important journalism is, you know, like actual reporting of facts and basic things that all news organizations should be doing. It is encouraging in that respect. It's too bad that it took such a horrible story to have to bring it out. But
what Freddie Douglass say, what is that? There's no peace without progress, or so.
Yeah.
Whatever, you know what I'm trying to say.
So your book, Shane mentioned it a little bit in his intro. Your new book is inspired by Langston Hughes. And I wonder if you would, for people who are not familiar with the work that inspired kind of the approach you took, if you would just share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I started a magazine called Take 5 in 1987. Around 1990 or so, local civil rights attorney Justin Meehan gave me Langston Hughes' book, Simple Story. I think he was with the Detroit, I forget that. But anyway, Langston had these whole series of stories based on this fictional character. And it was just rich with, he was the Walter Mosley before Walter Mosley, but it had all these different characters, neighborhood folks, bums, drunks, streetwalkers. But he told these stories, and I was fascinated by it. So I tried it out when I had Take 5. And when I say when I tried it out, it is creating characters, dealing with real issues, but creating fictional characters and fictional events to tell stories. So I tried it out back in the early 90s. Then I went to the Post-Dispatch in 2003. And thank God I had an editor, Dick Weiss, who was actually familiar with Langston Hughes and Ralph Ellison and Richard Wright. He knew Black Arthur, so he knew what I was trying to do. So he allowed me.
Well, and I was going to say, if you show up at the paper and say, let me just make up some stuff.
I know, right?
that's not going to fly everywhere. Yeah.
Bill McCullum doesn't make up stories. So he let me do it a couple of times. And but he always said, Sylvester, when you do this, make sure the reader knows that it's fiction. So you have to give him a little tip, a little paragraph before the fictional story to let the reader know that this is a fictional story. So Dick let me do it, and I continue to play around with it. I just think it's a fascinating way to get your demons out. It's a fascinating way to tell stories. And again, going back to what I said earlier, it's another tool to tell, to be a good storyteller.
Right. And it's a way of revealing truth by making up a fiction about it, I guess.
Yeah, you give yourself an escape route, Oh, that's not me.
So one of the so the book you actually put together is there any, what's the newest writing in here? I guess is maybe 2017, is that right?
I think the death of the dope man.
Right.
I think it was 2017, yes.
Okay. So when you looked back and kind of took a look at the things you had to choose from to put in here, what was your guiding framework?
Good question. I was looking for stories that showed my growth. I look back at the stories that I wrote, I could see what kind of writer I was and what I was thinking about and how I was trying to communicate. But I also wanted stories that had that Langston Hughes lilt to it. It had a little rhythm to it, had a little bounce to it. And stories that, just made you go, And I guess the White Castles with Jesus stories were like that. They had a bigger meaning. It was about morals and ethics and values and all that sort of thing. So those are the kind that really stuck with me, the kind that really had a story within the story.
Right. So you mentioned the White Castle with Jesus. One of the other recurring motifs is the guys at the tire shop.
Yeah.
So introduce us to these two guys. Tell us about them.
Okay, I started those guys. I think I was at the Post when I started those guys. It's Saul and Sal, Solomon and Salvador. They're twin brothers. They're in their late 70s. They own a used tire shop in the hood. There are plenty of used tire shops in my neighborhood, but these two guys, they represent the yin and yang of Black consciousness. Black folks are not monolithic. So Sal is very conservative. He doesn't have time for this protesting and complaining. He's a conservative. You know, you do your job, you show up, and stop complaining. Where Saul, his brother, is completely opposite. He is, I guess, the somewhat militant, somewhat radical, somewhat always took in Saul's world. Every problem that black folks face today can be traced back to white folks and slavery. So he always makes those connections. And the interesting thing is, I am both of those individuals. You know,
I was going to ask you, have you been them? I mean, does it change like in different parts of your life?
I'm mostly Saul, but I have been Sal. There are some issues and things that just get on my nerve, and I'm like, come on, people. So yeah, I can be Sal, but Saul is. I think I lean more towards Saul, but those voices are always in my head. Whenever, even when I was at the Post-Dispatch, writing about issues, I always, approached it from their perspective. What would he say? What would he say? And because they not only represent African Americans, they represent people, all people, because we all have these thoughts. We all get sick of racism. We all get sick of police brutality. We all get sick of crime in our neighborhoods. So yeah, I am both. I'm schizophrenic.
Makes for great writing, though.
Yeah.
Do you know what they look like? Like, do you picture them in your head?
It's more of a feeling than a look.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of, I can see their personas. They're both,
right.
Well, Saul is somehow bigger than Sal, even though they're twin brothers. I guess Saul took care of himself.
Nature versus nurture.
Yeah, so I don't really put faces on them, but I have they have personas.
This is an excellent time for me to mention you also did the art for this new book.
I did.
And which I think is super cool. And I didn't know from the introduction, when I read in the introduction, I discovered that you've been drawing like all your life.
Yeah.
So did you always know you were going to illustrate your own book, or did you, what was your thought process?
I did not. All right, I'll make this quick. I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, and my first passion was comics. I used to do my own comic books as a kid. And later in reflection, I found out that what I was doing was writing out my inks. We were very, very, very poor. And I used these comic strips of mine to get that stuff out. So I always did comics, and I always drew. I was drawing. And so my mother wanted me to go to the Watchtower Track Society and become an artist in the religion. And I actually went to community college to study commercial art. It was there that I got sidetracked into journalism. But yeah, art was always my thing. So when I did this book, I think it was my girlfriend, we were talking, and she was like, why don't you just do your own illustration? I'm like, I can't draw again. It's been 35 years. So then I said, you don't have to be good. Just, do what you used to do. And it's amazing that those skills, that love of telling a story visually came back. And then, so, old age is a strange thing. You find yourself doing stuff you haven't done in years.
I think that's great. I mean, I tell people all the time, one of the bad sides about being an adult is that you can make it very easy to never learn anything new. Like, right. It's really easy to just get on autopilot and not, and so to revisit that passion of yours and that skill I think that's amazing.
Well, I like to challenge myself, and I did a mural in my living room about 2 years ago, and I loved it. So I think here's how I imagine my old age, my last years. I want to write novels and do oil paintings again. So that's my blessed planet.
You'd be doing double what George W.'s doing. All he's doing is oil paintings. So if you can write novels on top of it.
Yeah, so he's popular. A war criminal is now popular again. So,
there you go. Keep it alive, as you said. I wanted to ask you if you would read. I mean, we've talked about some of the others, but I really wanted to ask you if you would read the first piece in the book. And while you find it, I'm going to read something from the introduction because I like how this sets it up. So you mentioned Dick Weiss, your editor at the Post, and he wrote a really very lovely foreword to the book. And
He did.
One of the things he said was, I do not know this to be true, but I'm almost certain that Sylvester was better at the language arts than with math, particularly geometry. I did poorly in geometry, but one thing I learned is that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Next paragraph. I have never known Sylvester to take the straight line wherever he goes or with whatever he does. And that's supposed to be a compliment. And I think this piece called The Pigeon is really a great example of that. And so I thought maybe you could read it for us.
Okay, I'm doing the best I can. I'm reading it off the screen.
Okay.
Should I go? It's called The Pigeon, and it was written in 1995. I've always considered pigeons to be flying rats, parasites, hobos with wings, who loiter White Castle's parking lots in search of half-eaten burgers and discarded fries and cheese. But last Saturday, I saw the most amazing thing. I was driving west on Lindell Boulevard between Doyle and Newstead when I noticed a pigeon in the middle of the street wildly flapping his wings. I noticed he was perched on top of something. The closer I got, the more frantically the bird worked to lift the object. I thought to myself, move, you stupid bird, don't get run over some garbage. At the very last moment, the pigeon gave up and flew to a nearby curb. As I passed the spot, I noticed what the pigeon was struggling to lift. Another pigeon. Apparently, a pigeon had been hit by a car and was in the middle of the street doing that familiar one-wing flap thing they do. I looked in my rearview mirror and noticed as I passed that several other birds had flown down and encircled the injured bird. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Were these birds actually showing compassion and risking their lives to save their injured brethren? I had to make sure. So I circled around, came back, and parked at the curb to watch the situation. Each time the traffic cleared, 4 or 5 pigeons would swoop down onto the injured bird, trying to lift him to safety. One would always perch himself on top of the bird, flap his wings wildly, and try to lift him. One bird flew over and tried to nudge the bird with his beak. If traffic picked up, the birds would fly to the curb where I was parked, as if in a conference, before trying again and again. One might wonder why I didn't just pop on my flashers and go get the bird out of the street. Well, there are 2 reasons. 1, I was truly amazed just watching the scene. And 2, I kept remembering Alfred Hitchcock's movie, The Birds, and imagined myself in an emergency room with my eyes poked out by a misunderstanding pigeon militia. Nevertheless, after about 5 minutes, I started to really feel sorry for the stranded bird and imagine what he must have felt watching the speeding Michelins come toward him. I put my fears aside, went and scooped up the bird and put him in the grass where his friends huddled nearby. There's no storybook ending here. I did not take the bird home and nurture him back to health. I wasn't anointed Pigeon King by the St. Louis Association of Pigeons. My car is still a poo-poo target. Call me a frustrated philosopher, but I was touched by this seemingly insignificant incident. I'm sure there's some pigeonologists out there laughing about my naivete, but in all my years, I've never seen pigeons attempt a rescue in the middle of a busy street. The pigeons symbolize several things to me: compassion, brotherhood, sacrifice, and perseverance. Perhaps there's a lesson to be learned. If we see a brother or a sister down and out, shouldn't we care? If young people are dying in our community, shouldn't we do something? If a fellow man's business is injured and struggling, shouldn't we collectively send the word out and attempt to save it? The pigeon received help from an unexpected source, me. Thinking back, I asked, why did I help? I don't even like pigeons. I helped because they were helping themselves and they cared. If pigeons can have that kind of self-preservationist attitude, shouldn't we? I once heard radio talk show host Bob Law tell a story about pigeons. He was making an analogy between pigeons and many Black people in his audience. As he told it, pigeons had the wing capacity to soar like eagles, but instead they choose to walk city streets and eat garbage. In other words, many of us choose to act the way they do. We're pigeons when we could be eagles, Lost said. Maybe that's true. Some of us don't live up to our true potential. Maybe we should be ashamed to be pigeons. On that day, however, I saw a different kind of pigeon. I saw pigeons risking their lives to help one of their own and strategizing for survival. I saw pigeons reach far beyond what I thought them capable. If it is a pigeon that I am meant to be, so be it. On this day, I am proud to be a pigeon. On this day, I have hope for the pigeon in all of us.
Thank you for reading that. I was trying to save you a little bit and pick out just one part you should read, but you can't. It's the whole totality of the pigeon experience. So I appreciate you indulging my request on that.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So when you think about that now, I mean, you wrote that, let's see, in 1996. Actually, it won an award for the best print column of the year that year from the Greater St. Louis Association of Black Journalists.
Yeah.
So in 2021, when you look back at the 1996 Pigeon Pride movement that you had there, what are you thinking about the Black community in St. Louis? Where the community is now, like what do you reflect on that?
I thought that I haven't changed much. The only thing that has changed is I tried to do something about those things I mentioned. I started the Sweet Potato Project in 2012, and that was to teach kids to be entrepreneurs so they can generate money in their own neighborhoods. So the only difference between then was I moved into more of activism stages. What I really think about is that time period. That was Take 5 magazine. It was maybe 6 years old at that time. And we had just started winning a bunch of awards because Jabari Asim, who we both know, became our editor. Victoria Anton, who I was married to at that time, was also the managing editor. So we were just winning awards. I mean, we went to awards against St. Louis American, St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and we walked out with more awards than all those guys. So it was that period of validation, I think, when I read that particular story. That's when I was starting to get comfortable with the fact that I have a voice, and and I could play with this voice because being a columnist or a commentator is cool, but then when you start playing with it and trying to do it different ways to make your point, I guess that was maybe the start of that.
Yeah. One of the things I mentioned to you when we talked last week, just kind of setting up what we wanted to get to, was this idea, because I first knew you when you were publishing Take 5. I think it was about 1997 or so that we met.
I think you were like 10 at the time.
Yeah, that's totally true. Still am. It's a weird thing, but so you've had something that a lot of writers don't ever have, which is complete freedom. You've published your own material. You have, been your own editor. You've been a columnist. And then you've also had something else that a lot of writers never get, which is a pretty big platform. I guess the Post-Dispatch would be the biggest example of that. But also you've worked with Pat Smiley. Like you've been in some big rooms and had some big audiences. Do you feel a tension between those two things? Have you felt ever that like you had both at the same time? Like I can say what I want to say and everybody's going to hear it, or has it been back and forth?
It's been back and forth. Take 5 was my time of true independence. This was my newspaper. I decided what was going in and what wasn't. The Post-Dispatch was a challenge, but it was a much larger platform. Take 5's readership was 99% Black. Post-Dispatch readership was 95% white. So it was a huge challenge to learn to talk to that audience and also to write under so many restraints. I was hired after Greg Freeman passed away. Greg Freeman was everybody loved Greg Freeman. I came in there and they said they wanted somebody to push the envelope, to push the ratio. I don't think they were asking for, because all righty, I'm gonna push. So that was a difficult time for me because there was always pushback, always do you want to say this, can you say this, why are you saying this? And I would go home with stomach aches because I was always questioned and undermined. But again, I don't want people to think I don't appreciate those years, because it was a huger platform. Because of the Post-Dispatch, I brought Bill Cosby to town. I had a face-to-face with Bill O'Reilly, who annihilated me. I met Tavis Smiley, Eric Michael Dyson. So, it is what it is. Even when they decided to get rid of me, it was the perfect timing, because while they were mulling that over, Tavis Smiley called and said, "I need somebody to work with he had his own book company, Smiley Books. So I'm looking for anybody to work with some of my artists. Do you know anybody?" I said, "I got a guy." So it was the time. The timing was so perfect, because they were trying to get rid of me, and we were going back and forth with the union. He made this offer, and I was able to go to the Post-Dispatch and say, "Hey, listen, I resign." I held a press conference and resigned before they could fire me.
Right.
So, I'm really getting kind of spooky with this, because I really feel like, there's a higher power just walking behind me. Because I don't think that I would still be mentally alive, maybe even physically alive, if I kept writing under that kind of pressure. So the freedom that I had at Take Five came back to me after I left the Post-Dispatch. Now, of course, the money changed hugely, but I learned to survive, and there was a whole lot of stuff that came with that. Poverty, and my wife and I broke up. I lost a house, cars, all that stuff. But this idea that I can do what I want to do, and then came along self-publishing, and it's like, all right, the door's wide open. So it really is a blast for me.
Well, I know you said you wanna ride out the rest of your career becoming Walter Mosley. So,
Yes. Yeah.
And he looks like he's having a lot of fun.
He does. I got a couple of hats. I'm gonna dress like him. I'm gonna be Walter Mosley.
So part of, and I don't know where this came in the timeline, but part of the life changes that you either had put upon you or you chose for yourself was moving back into the city, moving back into a neighborhood that a lot of people would not choose to move back into. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah.
And I want to know why you did that. And I also, the last piece in the book is really profound, and it's called "The Dope Man is Dead." But talk first about where you live and why you live where you live.
Yeah, it was interesting. Of course, that was my down period. That's when I lost everything. Me and my wife had broken up, so I did move back into O'Fallon Park neighborhood and 21st Ward, and it was so refreshing, because my wife and I lived on the south side, over there, Hampton and Chippewa area. So even though I'm black and I write black, I wasn't living black. I lived in a majority white neighborhood for a good 15 years. So I went back to the hood, and one of the first things I noticed was a Friday night in North St. Louis. Friday night, and the people came out of there. It was payday, and people came out on the front, and they were playing music, and I just looked out the window. I smelled all these wonderful smells of chicken and all this stuff, and they're playing music from different generations. There was some Marvin Gaye playing, there was some Nelly playing, and there was some Diana Ross and the Supremes. I was like, oh, I'm home. So that's been my experience. So I went there, and then I moved. Me and my daughter lived together in Bellefonte neighborhoods for about 3 years. Then I moved into Baden. Oh my Jesus. And that's where I met the dope man. That's where there were, weekend shootings, and it was bizarre. But even in that, I saw beauty. I mean, there were fathers and mothers walking their kids to the bus stop to go to work, to go to school. There were older people who I called, the neighborhood watch people, who were watching the neighborhood when people weren't away. And then there was the dope man. And this blew me away, that the neighborhood watch people depended on the dope man to keep peace in the neighborhood. And he did. He lived right above me. And there was no nonsense in front of our house. So that was a revelation to me, to see these different dynamics within the chaos of poverty. But it was it was a wonderful welcoming to come back to the neighborhood of my youth. And it ignited so many stories in me. I think my novel, which was in the works for like 30 years, it came to life with these experiences. I was once again reconnected with my background and my people and all these wonderful, beautiful stories. So, like I said, somebody else is pulling the strings. I'm just, trying to live up to the challenge.
What I loved about the story you tell about moving back and having some order enforced by the dope man, it reminded me so much of one of the points you made in your previous book about the Sweet Potato Project, which is that when people are working with at-risk youth from the inner city, a whole lot of the talk is about, you got to get away from this. You got to get out of this neighborhood. You got to leave this behind. And for so many kids, that is not an appealing option because this is where they are known. This is where there is something that makes sense to them, even if, like you said you don't want to romanticize like that there's a drug dealer walking around with an automatic weapon, but there is an internal logic to it.
Yeah.
That isn't that apparent from the outside, I think.
You're absolutely right. We teach our kids to hate their communities, to escape their community, to get out of their communities. And they go and make millions for other people, the successful ones in entertainment and clothing and music and all that stuff. If we ever teach our kids to make money where they are right now, be it growing food, making products, making music, making clothes, all that stuff right now. What if we start teaching these kids to be entrepreneurs in their own neighborhoods? And like you said, a lot of this stuff is simple marketing, basic rules, supply and demand. That's what runs the drug trade. People want it and you find a way to get it to them. But there's so many other things that people want. They want food, they want clothing, they want music. So, even though I put the Sweet Potato Project on hold, it's still in my soul to create an entrepreneurial school, a K through 12 school that prepares these kids to be entrepreneurs in their own neighborhoods right now. If we ever can do that, if African Americans could ever take total responsibility for their education, for their economic development, for all that, we could turn this thing around. Because we have to stop putting our hopes and dreams on our kids getting out and going to the major corporations or doing yada yada yada, going to play football. We have to create the incentives and the opportunities in our own neighborhoods. Long answer to your short question, but
well, I think it suffuses through everything that you do, so I think it's obviously something you're working on from a lot of different angles.
Quickly, Amanda, and that is it.
Go ahead.
It is everything that I do. I am a self-made entrepreneur simply because I was too dumb to be afraid. I can do it. Why not? But the key to my success, if you will, there was always people, black, white, whatever, who came to me and said, "You got something special," and they were willing to walk me to opportunity. That is the key to our children's success: validating their gifts, helping them put those gifts in motion.
You just walked me right up to the last thing I was going to say. I think we got to take some questions in a minute, but my favorite line in the whole book is in your acknowledgments at the end, and you say, "My life is a testament to the power of imagination." Yeah. And I think that's what you're doing. That's what you've been doing, right? You're imagining your life as you go, but you're imagining possible futures and possible ways to come at this this continued set of problems from a lot of different ways.
Absolutely. As a kid, all I had was dreams. Poverty was a constant. My father was alcoholic. All that stuff was real. All I had was my imagination. All I had was black and white movies. All I had was the Fox Theater, and I dreamed and I dreamed and I lived those dreams. And again, I thought I could do anything. Starting a newspaper, who's to tell me I can't do it? Writing a book, I haven't lived it to my own potential. I wanted to be in Hollywood, or movies I want to make, So, I am a testament to my imagination, or to imagination. And I hope all kids out there learn to be comfortable in their dreams.
Well, Shane,
I was
I see you sending me notes. 5 minutes, 2 minutes. Okay,
I was listening for my cue to magically reappear.
there you are.
We have a lot of really fantastic comments from Brian, especially sharing some really fantastic links for the Sweet Potato Project, for the history of Take Five. So thank you so much, Brian. As I'm like Googling like Sweet Potato Project, and Brian's already posting the link. So yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
And we have a comment from Chris Indo, another kind of legend in St. Louis journalism. So we have a great crowd here. So Chris says, "What an enjoyable conversation." And we will start with a question from Rudolph. And I will say, audience, if you type up any questions that you might have, just over in the comments section. And we have a lot of time for questions, and I have several of my own, but want to make sure that we have time for yours. So Rudolph is asking, do you feel that African American children should be taught to invest and grow their neighborhood in school, such as elementary and high school?
I absolutely do. And the unacknowledged secret to this is hip hop. I listen to Jay-Z, I listen to T.I., I listen to Queen Latifah, I listen to Akon. They're all talking about buying the block, buying the neighborhood, investing in your own neighborhood. If we could find a way to make that a marketing hip hop message with banners and the hip hop artists themselves investing in it, coming to St. Louis or whatever city, and encouraging these kids to do it, if you could put a message behind it, a musical message, it would be powerful. And I don't think that hip hop artists, even though they're singing about it, I don't think they even know the potential that they have to really make real change in Black communities.
So you mentioned a little bit earlier that you had to preface all of your articles with like something saying this is going to be a work of fiction. And I'm wondering, from the structure of your book, if you felt like that was going to help with the structure of your book and giving more explanation, and what made you decide like this has to be in there?
Yeah, well, if you notice, when you get the book, there's something I wrote called The Story Before the Story, which kind of explains what was going on before, when that story was written. Yeah, to be honest, I didn't like giving the reader a heads up that this was fiction. I did it because Dick Weiss at the Post-Dispatch told me to do it. So in other words, I couldn't do it. But if you read those pieces of Take Five or on my blog, they were just straight up story. I did not, there was no intro, there was no explanation. It was just the story as it was. So, and your second question was, why did I decide to use those stories?
And what made you think about using them for structure? Like,
I was really trying to, if you notice, there's a chronological 1995 all the way up to 2017. I put them in that order. So I did two things. One, there were the stories that I really liked that meant something to me. And secondly, I was trying to chart my growth. I was trying to see how I had changed and how I had articulated and how I had communicated these things. And also to chart my confidence. Because by the time I got to, Uncle Ray, I was very nervous about Uncle Ray because he was just so far out there. I wasn't sure that audience would get the fact that I have given racism a persona. He's a person.
Yeah, we didn't even get to Uncle Ray. Talk about Uncle Ray. I know.
But buy the book. So I was a little nervous if audiences would really grasp the fact that, man, he's actually having an argument with racism. But as we get later on in the 2000s, I'm very confident with the Uncle Ray story. I can have fun with Uncle Ray, Saul and Sal, the Dope Man, and my meetings with Jesus. I charted my own growth and my own sense of confidence in telling those stories. which is why I'm going to write novels now.
Yeah.
Because no one is going to tell you that you can't. So
Can't tell me I can't. I sell 2 copies. I'm cool.
So speaking of Dick Weiss, he is here in the audience as well. So yeah, we have everyone.
My nemesis.
Oh no! It sounds like he's supporting you a lot right here.
Dick has been my mentor, my friend, my buddy. We had our moments at the Post-Dispatch, though. But anyway, that's another story.
Maybe for not when it's being recorded. So Richard says, thank you for the shout out, Sylvester. I loved hearing you read that pigeon story. What a great voice you have. Are you going to do an audiobook for this?
There actually is an audiobook of White Castles with Jesus and Uncle Ray at the used tire shop. There's an audiobook. I didn't talk about it because this is Left Bank. But yeah, there's an audiobook. So if you go to the Amazon site, can you say that here? I know, right? You can get the audiobook. There's audiobook.
We don't like to cuss on the air.
You open the door. I was trying to be nice.
I didn't know it was available only there. We need to work on that.
Screen these questions.
or for a premium price, Sylvester will come to your porch and read it to you.
Yeah.
Hey,
Right.
the door's wide open.
I know, right?
Yeah.
We'll just, they can pay Left Bank Books. We'll just continue to do author event series, and you'll read one a night. It'll be great.
Works for me. As long as I get lunch, cool.
I think that, we'll chat about ways that you can make your audiobook available, because there are really great independent supporters of, or companies that are supportive of independent bookstores, including Libro.fm, which I'm certain that if it is not proprietary, which I hope it is not, they would probably be very interested in carrying your book. So,
Well, a quick note, that was another challenge. I had never done an audiobook. I'm sorry, I did do one for one of the books that I worked on called Brainwashed. And once I did that, I thought, this is doable. So that was my first shot trying to do an audiobook, and that was, I liked it.
Yeah. So Brian has left a couple more links in there. So if you aren't paying attention to the comments, definitely check out some of the links that Brian is sharing, and also some of the links that Richard is sharing now. It's like a link off in the comments.
Is this man Brian that's doing this?
Yes.
Apparently. I don't know who's raising the children. I have no idea. But
My man. Go on, Brian. Thank you.
But Brian's asking, he has a question instead of just a link. Keep sharing the links, though. This is great. Brian's asking, are you familiar with Dream Builders for Equity?
Yes, I am. And that's another. St. Louis is so rich. We don't really realize that everything I talk about, teaching kids to be entrepreneurs, to build houses, to grow food, everything's here. Dream Builders for Equity. There's other home building nonprofits. We got it all. If we could just bring those folks together and somehow get them the same resources we give to, build the downtown stadium or where all these other big highfalutin development deals in rich neighborhoods, we can bring these nonprofits together and find a way to fund a mission, a empowerment mission. St. Louis could set a template for changing the city around. So yes, Brian, long answer to your short question. I'm very familiar with Dream Builders for Equity.
Mike, one of my questions, I'm wondering, with all of the nonfiction that you're having to do right now during the pandemic, I'm wondering if you've had much time for fiction writing and how the pandemic might be shaping that.
Yeah, it's been challenging. It's been challenging because fortunately I finished my novel before I accepted this position, but I keep going back to it because I keep running into people or stories that kind of add elements of stuff to it. So it has been challenging, but the book is finished and I'm really working on the follow-up to the first novel. Again, COVID has helped me sharpen my skills. It's how do you tell a story of hope and resiliency and creativity in the midst of such death and devastation. Almost 600,000 people have died. How do you tell a story, of survival? But I find that it is really kind of easy to do because there are so many stories out there and so many wonderful, vibrant personalities. It to me is just feeding my war chest of stories.
What else did I have? Amanda, do you have another question while I?
Oh, I got a million questions.
While I go back to my notes.
Oh, sure. Oh, you've got notes. That's good. So you've spent a lot of time, like when you've spent a lot of time doing for I don't want to make this sound like you're a saint, but like you've spent a lot of time doing for others, like on behalf of others, and I sense you're wanting to reclaim your time a little bit and do some things that you've been wanting to do. How do you find that balance? Because I know you're never going to walk away from these dreams you have about, what could be. Mm-hmm. So do you see it as in service of still the same? I mean, how do you do that? How do you say it's okay for me to just write this novel and not, necessarily go to the board meetings of a nonprofit every night or something like that?
Right. Well, to be honest, the novel started when I was a utility worker at Laclede Gas Company. In fact, the title of the book is Gateway Gas. So I've been jotting on this, messing with this story for the last 30 years or more. So that really didn't get in the way. I hear what you're saying about servicing others, but I'm really not. And I'm really doing is servicing myself, quenching my own questions and my dark side, speaking up for when I defend Black people and Black mothers and welfare mothers and the dope man, I'm defending all pieces of myself because I know that there is a tendency to look at these people, entire communities, entire cities from this narrow box of poverty and no good and no hopes and no dreams. So all I'm doing is pushing back against those stereotypes. And all I'm doing is speaking up for who I know that I was the poorest of poor. I had some terribly irresponsible habits. But through all that, there was a kid trying to do the best he could do. And if he had more resources and more support, he could do those. So, I never saw myself as servicing others. Even with the Sweet Potato Project, I definitely believe that our only route to survival, and I'm going to say our, I mean the Black community, our only way to do that is to do for self, to do what Marcus Garvey and Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad and all those guys told us to do, and that is build your own thing. So that's a passion of mine. I had no desire to go into the nonprofit realm, and I was horrible at it. But I felt that I had to do it, not to save the kids, but to save myself. In the process, I ran across these young people who, some of them I had judged, some of them I put in the stereotypical box. But I learned so much from these kids who challenged me and showed me who were so talented, who did what I say, and I challenged them to do marketing plans and to do advertising campaigns and to make cookies out of sweet potatoes and sell it. And they rose to the occasion and they shined. So it was just as much for me as it was for them. I hope that answers your question.
It does.
Yeah. So one of my questions so we hosted Jabari in conversation with his son last week, which was so much fun. Like it was so incredible. Yeah. And seeing so G-Ra was raised in St. Louis, and seeing kind of Jabari, I don't know if there was G-Ra's pretty brilliant on his own, but I assume there's some influence from Jabari, and Jabari is brilliant. Yeah. So it definitely wore off on. But I'm wondering if you are also kind of working with young writers and working with other young people in writing groups to kind of guide them into a long career like yours.
Interesting. Quick note. I was the first one to publish Jabari. His wife, Liana, I had Take 5 and I started looking for a writer. She took me to her house, and there was this young man in this house of papers all over the place and writings all over the place. Jabari was brilliant from the start. But Jabari made it clear, I'm working with Take Five, but I got other ambitions and other desires. So he was on a trajectory. He only had him for a little while, maybe 5 years. To your second question, I do the best I can. If I notice a kid who's got a gift of writing, and there were many in the Sweet Potato Project, I encourage them to write more, to write. In fact, my ongoing comment to kids is write. Don't worry about publishing. Don't worry about, a blog. Just write your experiences. If for nothing else, you can write something when you're 16 and come back to it when you're 26, and you have real authentic feelings and emotions. If you do decide to become a writer, you've got chapters and chapters of real life stuff that you felt, experienced, and went through. My story is a perfect example. The book I'm writing on now, Gateway Gas, was started way back in the early 80s when I was working for the public utility company. And it's valuable stuff, man. And one thing about me, I always wrote, even though I had no desire to be a writer, I always wrote my emotions and stuff. So all that stuff I have now, I have my comic books from when I was in my early teens. All that stuff is valuable right now because it's real, it's authentic, and it's real. So yeah, and whenever I get a chance to talk to the kids, especially if I notice that they've got a gift of communication, I inspire them to write. And whatever I can do, if I can talk to them or read their stuff or whatever, I try to make myself available.
Yeah. And I mean, the most important thing that I have heard authors tell young people is to complete something. So even if it isn't like your absolute magnum opus, like if it's not like the best thing that will be like making you the next Stephen King, it still gives you that practice, and like just being able to write until you are done gets you to a point where you can say, I did it. I can do that. I can do that again.
Yeah. Well, it depends on what you call done. I, on the other hand, just say write. I don't care if you write 2 paragraphs and never go back to it again. Just keep writing. Keep writing, short stories, pages. Don't even put the pressure on yourself to call it a short story. Just write, and keep writing and writing and writing. Before you know it, you may have a short story, or you may have a novel. You never know. So just write. Yep. Write, I always say.
I recommend going to journalism school because when you're a journalist, someone will tell you when you're done, and it's called a deadline, and then you're done.
Yeah.
It's for people who procrastinate. It's excellent.
That's weird because I never went to journalism school.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I learned everything in real time. Yeah, I never regretted it. I had my own. I set my own boundaries, and it wasn't until I got to the Post-Dispatch where somebody dared to say, "You must do it this way in the AP style." And no. So that was challenging.
All right. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure to have both of you. Sylvester, I don't believe we've ever actually met in person.
I might have seen you at the store, but
yeah,
we've met either. Yeah. It's been a pleasure.
Really, just a pleasure. And I hope that we get to do this again. I hope that when the next book comes out, hopefully we will be back to doing in-person events. So we can do this with like a signing line out the door and me with my Post-its. Like, yeah.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah. And Amanda, thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Tell Brian thank you as well for sharing all the links, like literally all of them. He shared the link for your last book, Sylvester.
Oh, wow.
He shared the link for the G-Raw event. So if anyone's watching and wants to know like what G-Raw's book is all about, it's there. Richard sharing links. It's perfect. My job was made so easy tonight by your friends and family. Like,
Cool.
Thank you.
Cool.
Nice to know they're occupied. Sylvester, it's really a pleasure. I appreciate, again, you asking me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Amanda. You were great.
And to the audience, thank you all so much for being here. I hope you have a great night. Check out our event calendar. Follow us on Facebook and YouTube for some really fantastic events that we have coming up. So, all right. Well, have a good night, everyone, and we will see you again.